All the way from Kansas today, we have Steve Riat. We are excited to have you. Thank you for spending some time with us today as we talk about life and leadership. Steve, welcome to the Crossing the Line podcast.
Larry, couldn't be more excited to be here with you.
Well, we're going to have some fun. I'll tell you that. You've done such an awesome job in your life of investing in others. You're a speaker and author. We've talked about all of that, and sales guy, and you lead peer groups. Do so much. You do so many things to use your skill and to use who you are to invest in the lives of others. So we want to learn a little bit about you, and so I want to take you back. I want you to think about a day in the life of Steve when he was 6, 7, 8 years old. I want you to think back and tell me, what was a day in the life like in your family? Set that family system up for me, and tell me, what was a day in your life as a young child.
Yeah, that's probably those ages are probably impactful for me. I remember I'm 8 years older than my youngest sister, my only sister, and so would have been expecting her at some point, right? Big change in life from a single
Mhm.
child to a little sister. Had lived in a smaller town in Kansas, so had lots of good friends that we had the old block party, right? All the friends got together on their big wheels and on their bikes, and that's what I remember growing up at that age. Had a lot of fun in the community, and just enjoyed life for sure.
You said something that we don't see a lot of, unfortunately, anymore, and that is children just playing out in the neighborhood, to run free and to ride bikes, and it's a bit different these days, huh?
Oh yeah, for sure. That statement of the street lights come on, it's time to come home. That was absolutely true for me. And mom probably had very little idea where I was most of the time, other than I showed up when I was supposed to.
I think, and I've heard this from so many leaders through the years as we have interviewed and talked, even on this podcast. That idea of go out, play when the lights come on, street lights, come home. That built a type of independence, a type of kind of, we were out, we knew we had responsibility to get home, but we did. I think we're missing some of that today. I think that the pattern I see is in leaders that back in the day when we could do that and feel safe. I'm not saying that we could even do that today, but when we could, and we were in that environment, I think it taught us about kind of being innovative and going out and being on our own, discovering, exploring all those things that true leaders have to have, that curiosity, with the responsibility of being home when the street lights, when they're on, you better book it home. So that's who you are. You're out riding bikes, playing. Now let's move up just a bit. Elementary school was just kind of you're saying, a fun. We were out, we were playing. What about junior high? Who were you in junior high?
Yeah, so in the middle of that, we moved to a little bit larger city. Definitely impactful to my childhood. Went from a very small town to a very large town, and learned very quickly that the things had changed. Especially, I lost some of that friend group that had surrounded me, and learned in the bigger city that had to fend for your own a little bit. And so was learning through that process of fending through your own, making a new set of friends through that frame. But things are really positive, I would say, and still have some of those friends today for sure on both sides of that. From the grade school side, even the junior high and high school friends. So still moving forward, but grew up in a little bit larger town in Topeka, Kansas, which is the capital. And that did have an impact from a standpoint that now I live in a much smaller town than either one of those. Made that choice to do that, but still can fend my own in the larger city when I have to, right?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? You go to this big town, and then you have to kind of find your identity. You kind of have to figure out, who are you and who are you going to be. So, were you when you were finding that out? You're trying to did you find yourself migrating? Were you Steve and junior high? Were you Steve the athlete? Were you Steve the tech guy? Were you Steve the? How did you find that identity? What were some of the struggles you went through to get there?
That's fair. Actually, I remember a simple story that when I moved from the smaller town in Topeka, I went back to go visit some of my friends, and I remember going to baseball practice with them. And between the year I had left, I could no longer hit a ball and I could no longer catch a ball. And that was a really interesting impact. And I couldn't understand it, how the kids could hit that ball and how they could catch that ball in the outfield. And later that fall, I realized that these glasses came into the realm. But you talk about something impactful. You don't know what you can't see until somebody points out you can't see the blackboard, right? I think that was a strong lesson
Wow.
for me because, I literally remember having that feeling of how can they hit that baseball when you can see it 5 feet in front of you? How can you catch that ball in the outfield when you can only hear it coming off the bat? But I didn't realize that they could see it and I couldn't.
Wow. That my wife had the same experience. She said when she realized all of a sudden she had glasses as a child, and junior high, and she said, "I suddenly realized that trees have leaves. You could actually see the leaves." So it was quite the experience, and that's kinda what you had. So you had that sight issue, got it corrected, then what
Yep.
happened?
Yeah, so, that really I wasn't very good in sports. I'm not a very tall, I'm not a very big guy. I think I graduated high school at 98 pounds. So it really set me down the path that I needed to be anyway. Really didn't do any athletics through junior high and high school, but I got into the more debate forensics world, which serves me well even today.
How about that? The debate forensics world. Now, did you do that in high school? Is that where we are now?
Yeah, I did that in high school. I had a gentleman named Ryan McKeithen. He was the coach slash teacher, if you will, and he taught me a lot. I tell the story that when I was in eighth grade, I had an English teacher that I couldn't diagram sentences. Still can't, so don't ask me to do that. Good news is I can ask AI to do it today. But she informed me that I'd probably be nothing more than a garbage man at that point,
Oh,
and that was not, not that there's anything wrong with a sanitation engineer by any means, but it was not meant as a compliment. And that stuck with me a little bit. And then when I got into high school, Ryan invested me a ton of time, Mr. McKeithen, and taught me where some of my God-given skills were at, and that was that ability to be some improv, the ability to have a good argument, the ability to have great communications, and that served me far better than diagramming sentences.
wow. And those things, how to have great communication, how to have improv. Those are really life skills, aren't they?
They are. I've recently gone down a rabbit hole of improv. I was listening to some other podcasts, and specifically, they were relating how improv can teach leadership.
Mm,
And the reason behind that is when you're leading in the moment, you're improv, right? Like we
right.
don't have words that we can communicate that are the same words in every situation. And the first law of improv that I discovered was yes and so
Mm,
whatever the person that you're working with is, you kind of have to do a yes and. And so you can't just say, no, your reality isn't true, and then end of scene, if you will. You have to be yes and then add to it. And that's something I've just discovered here recently, and I'm super happy to be able to share it. That I've discovered that, and it also plays in another realm of my world of sales. It's the exact same concept too. Customers that clients that you're talking with, you never know where they're going to take you.
mm.
But if they tell you that they're having a particular problem, you can't tell them no, but you can do a yes and so we've enjoyed a lot on the team here, doing a little bit of improv lately, learning some exercises to get our brains to listen a little bit better, because that's the other
Mm,
part of improv, right? You
mm.
can't improv if you don't hear the other person. So it's amazing how that all tied together here. 50, I'm now 50 from those high school experiences.
Well, you may be 50, but you look like you're 30, Steve. So there we have that. But what you're teaching us is so relevant and so important to speak, to listen well, and then to speak into the language, to speak into the person, to speak according to what they say, to join them where they are instead of resisting or Many times we have a prescribed methodology, I think, in our world of leadership, even, or even maybe sales. And someone would say, I really would like a piece of chocolate cake. I think that's what I need. And we have a great wealth of knowledge and an arsenal with yellow cake. We don't have chocolate, but so we spend a lot of time trying to convince them of what they need when we should be listening and using improv to figure out how to meet their needs where they are, instead of trying to convince them that we have this scripted, prescribed solution that probably isn't really what they need at all.
Absolutely fantastic example. And probably the final piece that I've been studying recently is I'm a fan of Chris Voss. That's he was the chief hostage negotiator for the FBI, and
Mm,
mirroring is one of the tactics he teaches you, right? And you can't mirror somebody without listening fully to what they said and
right.
then being able to mirror their words. So I think you put all those systems together for you of yes, and a little bit of mirroring and, active listening for the purpose of good, right? Like, I think
Oh,
both of
yeah.
these, all of this can be used in a not so positive way. And as long as you're aligned to that purpose of good, I think you get really positive outcomes.
Steve, we've known each other for a while, and you're familiar with our system here. And as you were talking, I couldn't help but think about our personality work and learning the language of others, whether it's that competent camel, tranquil turtle, much loved monkey leading line. The animals aren't important. What's important is learning to speak the language of those personalities. In order to do that, you have to listen. We call that blinking. You have to be able to blink who they are. You can't blink if you don't listen. And then realize that their language is not your language, right? Many times. And so you have to get to where they are and speak that lion language or that turtle language. And that's a great lesson, Steve. Thank you for teaching us about that. And I'm excited about your improv work. That sounds really cool to me, and that you're using it with your team. And I look forward to hearing how that's going. But I'm gonna bring you back for a minute, all
Yes,
right?
sir.
We're back in high school. We're moving out. You have, you found your identity. You've worked your way through, and now you're headed to what happens when you graduate. Where are you headed?
Yeah, I went to college. I did live at home through college. Came out debt free. Enjoyed that
Mm,
very much.
congratulations.
Well, thank you. You know, college was, I got the paper at the end, and enjoyed the experience. Worked pretty much, 30-ish hours a week at Radio Shack. And, I think that's part of my story is I've really had 3 jobs, which is kind of interesting. I bagged groceries in like early high school. Um, Literally in the parking lot of the grocery store was Radio Shack, where one day I was in there checking out all the latest, technology, love technology. And that store manager asked me if I knew anything about commissions. And I said, well, not really. And he goes, well, the more you sell, the more you make. And I loved that concept. And so I worked my way through college at Radio Shack. I remember worked in the mall in Topeka, which had 2 of the great things I loved: time to get my homework done at the counter because they didn't really get busy to the evenings, but also all the girls hung out at the mall, and that worked out fantastic.
Hey, that's a win-win.
It was.
So you bagged groceries,
Yes, sir.
and then you worked at Radio Shack.
Yes, sir.
And was there another job? Did I hear you say you had 3 or no, just
Well,
2?
the one I sit in now, that's the 3rd one. So let me finish that story.
Wow, yeah.
I graduated college on a Saturday, and on a Sunday, I got a call from Radio Shack district manager. And I remember going, well, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about past graduation. And he goes, well, why don't you manage a store? Okay. So I took on my first store management job, I think
Wow.
2 days later in Topeka. I worked there roughly 6 months. I remember it was October 30th, because it was the day before Halloween. And I got another one of those phone calls. Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? I don't know, maybe a Halloween party. And he goes, well, how about you go manage the largest Radio Shack in the state? And I said, well, Kansas City sounds fantastic. And he goes, no, Hayes, Kansas. Well, I knew where that was at. My mom was from Hayes, and it's pretty remote on I-70 out here. And so I literally picked up everything I owned in my apartment, moved within a few days with a couple buddies of mine out to Hayes, Kansas, and took over the Radio Shack there,
Wow.
which gave me a lot of blessings. I learned to manage a team pretty well out here. Again, we were several hours from kind of the closest other Radio Shack, but at that time, this is in the '90s. We sold a lot of computers because there was no web purchasing at that time, really,
Right.
and we sold a ton of computers. Made some of the best friends that I still have. In fact, I work with one of them still today, directly.
Mm,
Uh, and we had a great time, but that experience led me to every day having to go to the bank, do the daily deposit, which I met
right.
my wife. She was the banker,
How
um,
about that?
and so that's where I met Jennifer 24 years ago. We'll be 25 this next summer, so pretty excited about that anniversary. But she's tolerated me all these years, and um, when we were looking to start a family, the retail world was not great, kind of October through January. And we had a conversation that said, you need to find another job. So I did exactly what I had done in the past. I walked across the parking lot to Next Tech, which is where I work today, 24 years later, and been here ever since. But
Wow. What a story.
I think you know. Uh, God led me to where I needed to be, and
Yeah.
I've grown my career from a frontline person here to the executive management team, and really enjoyed every step of that path.
So here's the pattern. You continue to search. You had to be assertive. You had to walk across the parking lot. You had to take a chance to go into Radio Shack. You had to go take a chance. I mean, you walk in and that's a great illustration though of you knew you needed to make a change, and instead of spinning on it, you did something. You didn't know if it was going to work out or not, but you made a decision. Hey, what I'm doing is not working out the way I want it to right now. So, you could sit and spin and moan and groan, or you could do something.
Yeah,
And you did something. And wow, and you've been there 24. Now I have to ask, got to go back to Jennifer for a minute. All right. So
yeah.
look, you're going into the bank and you've been known, you've already told us you walk into these places and things happen. How did you convince her to go out with you?
Well, so all the banking gals, and I say that specifically, they were gals at that time, many of which are still in our lives today. They said you ought to ask her out. And I had just recently broken up with a previous girlfriend, and so I thought that was a great idea. So I asked her out, and she said no.
Oh,
Um, and they'd all told me that she was going to say yes,
and she said no.
and she said no. And so,
Gosh.
quite frankly, I moved on. And 2 weeks later, she called me and said, "Well, why didn't you ask me out again?" And I said, "Well, you said no." She goes, "Well, I was kind of playing hard to get. What's the problem?" I'm paraphrasing. I'm pretty sure she would argue that statement at some point, but she definitely told me no on the first time.
But she called you.
She did. Yeah, she
And
did.
so did she ask you out or did you ask her out again?
You know, I couldn't answer that question, to be honest. It worked out. I later, she's going to be
Good for
embarrassed
her.
I tell you this story, but I later found out that her parents lived where she lived with her parents, about probably a football field away from where I lived, behind the apartment I lived. And her and her sister had stalked me. They knew what cars were in front of my apartment. They knew everything about me. So uh, she was not
Wow.
taking a lot of risks. She knew exactly what she was getting into
I
there.
love good for Jennifer. Wow,
Yeah,
she had a little leadership going on her
for
own
sure.
time, didn't she? Good for her. So so you and Jennifer are married now. You're working, you've moved, you walked across the parking lot. You're at Next Tech. There you go. And you've been there for what, 25 years?
24 years. Yeah,
24
24.
years.
Yeah.
So out of those 24 years, help me to know, from what you have, how have you grown from what you've learned from where you started, from where you are now? Kind of give us a synopsis of how you've grown and what have you learned through that process.
Transparently, I was a pretty big idiot when I started. It was a lot about getting what I needed to get what I
Mm,
wanted.
mm,
There's a couple pivot points in my career. Obviously, the birth of my two boys was part of that. Your responsibilities change. Um, Somewhere after my second child was born, Carson, I was a supervisor at this point. I had a guy that worked for me. His name was Brian. And Brian had, we'd done our weekly catch up. And I can almost remember the call, but this flip phone days and had a
right.
call with him. And I remember him. Um, he was kind of chatty and we got done with all the business. And then he told me how proud he was of his family. And he had a 2-year-old little girl and he was expecting a son soon. And I remember, having that call with him, not to know that within 5 minutes of that call, he would run a stop sign and be killed instantly. And,
Oh,
that taught
oh
me
my.
more in an afternoon than any
Mm,
leadership experience ever has. Um, I hope nobody ever has to go through that. But first of all, it taught me that, being personally invested with your team is so important because I got to tell what the last things he talked about were to his family later, right?
mm,
And today, even one of McCarson's friends is one of those children's of Brian's that we were talking about. And, um, so I get to see that, but still think about Brian frequently, and you never
wow.
know who's going to be here for how long, and
Wow.
doing what we do. We have to be accountable for the people that we work with, but that personal connection means so much more to me today, and I hope I live that every day.
Steve, thank you for sharing that. And unfortunately, we learn through tragedy many times, and it sounds like that you have experienced it. That was a cornerstone event for you. That was a life changing event for you. That was a priority changing event for you.
Yeah,
So thank you for sharing that. And I love that you could go back to Brian's family and share with them his last words about them. That's so powerful. What a great thought around leadership. And we could visit all day, but we need to bring this thing to a close. But I want to ask you to help us just for a moment. I want you to think about those Steves who you were back then, back when you were at the grocery store or the Radio Shack, or before you walked across the parking lot 24 years ago. There are those listening who are trying to figure this thing out in their leadership, and they're learning and they're growing, but they're searching, they're hungry. What would you tell them? What would you tell these aspiring leaders who are trying to find their way in life and leadership? Give us 2 or 3 things that you can leave us with to say, "Hey, guys, this is what you need to think about as you continue your journey of life and leadership."
wow, deep question. First I would say find a mentor that you can share your daily troubles with, so they can help you find more empathy, more um, help through your journey. Find a mentor that has been there, done that. Uh, just ask somebody. You'd be amazed who's willing to help you. I think that's pretty clear on that. And then the final piece is, I think when we get done with this journey, hopefully I'm only in the middle of mine, but hopefully when you get to the end of the journey, you'll remember the people, you'll remember the experiences.
Mhm.
Hopefully you can celebrate your successes, but the people are probably they are the most important piece of this. And I don't know that I always had that, at the beginning. And so I think if I could relay just that final piece of investing in the people, because
Mm.
if you take care of the people, they'll take care of you and your business, and just do a great job of getting that done.
Beautiful, Steve. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for sharing with us your story, your life, some of the things that you went through, your struggles. It means so much. You have invested today, and I thank you for that. Thank you for investing your time in sharing in this podcast. It's been a joy. You're an amazing leader and a man, husband, father. Thank you for who you are, and thank you for what you do and your leadership. And we will look forward to watching the next time. I can't hardly wait for you to cross the parking lot again. Who knows what's going to happen? But we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Appreciate you too, Larry.
Take care.